All right, so welcome everyone to the March 16th SIG Node meeting. Like all meetings, they're recorded, and if you're not able to attend, you can check them out later on YouTube. The agenda seems to be growing as I'm looking at it here, so let's go through our normal flow. I don't know if Sergey, if you're here, if you want to talk through where we are with merge rates.
Hi. Yes. So yeah, we again, even after code freeze, we are still in the green. So we burning PRs rather than accumulating them. Last week we burned 17 cherry picks. Which is great. We accumulated a lot during this code freeze time, and also like more than 9 SIG instrumentation PRs. Likely it's structured logging related. So I know we have an exception for that, and we keep merging those. Elana, do you want to say more?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what's going on with structured logging, maybe. Do you want me to show the board? Give me 1 second. And I will share my screen. So, and I had, I think, somewhere on the agenda talking about this. There were 2 things that I submitted exceptions for SIG Node. So one was structured logging, because we don't want to leave the kubelet half migrated, and the other was we missed merging by a day for updating the probe termination grace periods. So both of those received exceptions. And everything is mostly working on time. The probe stuff got merged. As far as structured logging goes, this is the board. This is everything that's in scope for this release. And like almost everything is done. Basically, all of the PRs that are left have been reviewed, LGTM'd, and are just waiting on approvers. I guess this one might not have an LGTM, but I can go back and add that. So that's the state of structured logging. And so we've got like 19 more PRs there, and then probably 1 follow-up to update the file in .hack to ensure that those don't regress to non-structured logging, and to clean up anything that we potentially missed. But that's kind of the state of that there. So that's great. But unfortunately, we're finding that reviewer time is a limited resource. So in terms of SIG Node PR triage, that's moving along as well, but we're definitely seeing things kind of blocking on needing approvers. So I guess this is not a call out or anything like that, but that's kind of where I'm just seeing in the past week the most limited bandwidth. And I think in part that's because we're actually seeing a ton of people stepping up and helping with review, which has been really awesome. So for everybody who has been helping with following the instructions in these docs here, helping with triage, helping with reviews, for the most part, I have been adding cards to the board, but not necessarily having the time to triage them. So very grateful for everybody who's been stepping up. It's been awesome.
Yeah, cool. So I think the last major piece item to call out just generally is for the features that we did put in this release. I think we're supposed to get our doc PRs open by today. So I know, at least for myself, I have 2 I need to do, and I'm sure there are others.
Yeah, I've got 1 to do as well.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Sergey and Elana. So I don't know, Jack, if you're here, if you want to do an update on what you found with respect to the probe issues we've been discussing.
Well, hey, thanks everybody. Sorry that I'm the annoying probe guy again. I'm looking forward to playing a different role at some point in the near future. I'm going to paste a couple links here. So here's an issue. This actually came out of the investigation into Docker shim versus non-Docker shim. So for my test, it was containerd, and it's a really long sort of tail. But the conclusion that's interesting is that the exec probe timeout feature gate, when you disable that, which is what landed with the fix prior to 120, it actually doesn't protect the previous behavior. There's an edge case where in the exec probe timeout equals false configuration, it's not that the timeout is ignored, but it's that probes that take longer than the timeout are actually just thrown away. So the sort of practical repro case is a negative probe. So like a probe that always returns failure that takes longer than the timeout to commence. I can see folks being confused. I've been explaining this to so many people. It's super hard to explain this with English language, but hopefully in the PR, there's unit tests and end-to-end tests that kind of express what's going on. I don't think this is a 121 emergency type thing. This has been, it essentially was released this way with 120. So the discovery is that exec probe timeout equals false has been sort of buggy since 120. So we don't have to rush in for the 121 release, in my view, but that's obviously your guys' call. Any questions?
No, just
Cool.
Thank you for helping us figure out bugs and best way of ordering these bug fixes. And I'm sure we can all take a look afterwards.
I had a quick question. So was the underlying issue that feature flag got accidentally removed in a refactor?
I wouldn't call it a refactor, but there was a follow-up commit for there was an original commit that delivered the bulk of the fix, and then there was a follow-up commit like a week and a half later, just rejiggering the way contexts are kind of layered on top of one another. And in one of those fixes, the exec probe timeout feature gate was not a factor, and so it creates this sort of like it disappears into the ether.
Removal was intentional or not?
Yeah, no, I would love to know that too. I CC'd Andrew. He's not here today, so maybe he's not around. So if I can get his attention, that's a simple question to ask him, because maybe there is a good reason and it needs to be fixed in a slightly different way.
Very cool. All right. Well, looks like we have some exciting reading on probes. Thank you for putting the doc together, and I'll take a look, at least for myself this afternoon. I'm probably one of those who can easily look confused as we keep talking about these things. So thanks, Jack, for putting a doc together. Next up was around the device plugin API. I don't know how to pronounce the
hi. Yeah, it's Ewals. That's my initial and my last name. Okay, so hi everyone. So I have a proposal pertaining to the device plugin API. As you may know, it already has an allocate call, then an optional pre-start container call. I have a couple of use cases that would benefit from having a deallocate and a post-stop container calls. As far as I know, this might have popped up more than once before. For some reason, it never actually went through. I'm not sure why. I'm just going to offer I'm going to present my use cases, and hopefully we can discuss whether or not this should go through. So I work with FPGAs mostly for network applications. We are trying to support usage of FPGAs for data centers, which means we tend to use Kubernetes. The idea is once we decide to kill this container, we have to know, we have to basically reset the FPGAs. If we don't do so, then the FPGA maintains its configuration, maintains its programming, basically, which means it can keep working on the network, taking up MAC addresses, IP addresses from the pools, possibly polluting the network, sending traffic. And if that happens at high speeds, that's really not something we would like to have. Plus, there's also the aspect of power consumption, which means if we just have FPGAs that are supposedly done working, but they are actually still working in the background because we couldn't reset them, that means we're just losing a lot of power. That's a nice use case for me, for my work, for using a post-stop container hook for the device plugin API. The deallocate is, well, I'm not sure if we should have both or not, but we have allocate and pre-start containers, so it might make sense to have both deallocate and post-stop container. Not sure what the logic of separating them was, but whatever it was, we might have to maintain it. We have another use for deallocate, which is we are able to partition our FPGAs, which means the device plugin we have for this would have to offer the entire FPGA as one, but then would offer also the same FPGA as, say, 4 smaller partitions. Once one of them is actually used, we can stop advertising the other. but we need to know when this gets deallocated so we can go back to re-advertising the partitioned versions. I have had other users who had different use cases. Someone had a different use case with, he wanted to basically be able to dynamically bind and unbind drivers to virtual GPUs. Right now, they can't do that with deallocate, obviously, but they have a workaround, but apparently this workaround doesn't work every time, so they end up having leaks per se. I think there are other use cases. Some people are interested in the PR, but they never mentioned their use case. I think we also have someone here who has a use case if she wants to talk about it, Roa.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Roa. I'm one of the maintainers of ACRI, an open source project. And yeah, just adding to what Mohammed mentioned, ACRI does use the device plugin allocate to advertise some resources, discover some resources and use them. And there's currently a need for another deallocate so that we can mark those resources as free that can be used by other pods or workflows as well. So right now we have a workaround for that, but it's not perfect. So having that consistency from kubelet side would make the scenario easier to maintain and better performance, of course, to free up resources right after we are aware of that. I wouldn't go into details, but yeah, we do have the concept of shared resource and other stuff that would make sense also to have this deallocate functionality.
Yeah. Okay. Also, I think the change doesn't have to be breaking to existing users. It can be an optional API call, just like the pre-stop container hook. So people who don't need it don't really have to use it. It's just an optional extra call. I guess that's it. That's what I have. So I already have, I think I had some, I had a pull request actually implementing this, but it was a while ago, so it might need a lot of freebases, but
yeah, so I think one, thanks for coming and sharing your use cases. I think there are some other folks who aren't on today's meeting that I think I'd want to have to also kind of review this. So folks like Renaud or Kevin, who've done a lot of work in the device plugin API from NVIDIA, I think I want to get their perspectives as well. But so I tried to draw attention to the PR towards them, and I'll follow up. I think maybe some of the history, I think I was trying to recall on why we did not do a deallocate. And I thought that the assumption was that you could clean up in your allocate from a past use. And so having a deallocate from the start was maybe deferred. Maybe the kind of question I have is like, do any of the devices y'all are exploring, are they like, are any of them like over the fabric or a type of like network connected devices?
Yes, at least for my case. So our FPGAs are usually hooked to the network, so they are network connected already. So they have, basically, you can think of it as they have two network ports. One is for control, which is just attached to the CPU that would actually use them with Kubernetes. And the other is, you can call it the data plane network interface, which means if we don't really reset it post-use right after we use it, it stands to actually pollute the data network. So I understand that we can clean it up when we allocate it again, but for the interim period between the allocation and the next allocation, not good.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if we'll reach consensus on this today without like a broader set of participants, but I appreciate you drawing out your use case. There are some other folks, I don't know, Mrunal, have these topics come up in the CDI working groups? I know that Alex was talking about it. I don't know how much you've engaged in those.
Yeah, I haven't attended the last couple of meetings, so I don't know. I'll just check with that group. I'll ping them on this one.
So maybe the other thing, Mohammed, and I apologize if I get the other speaker's name. Have you engaged at all with, there's a container device interface kind of working group community that is also trying to explore particular problems in this area?
I think Mrunal have mentioned it when I was talking to him. I didn't have the time to actually look deeply into it. The last time I actually talked to Renault was about 5 months ago, so it was still early in the development. Not really sure what the state of things is now. So
yeah, so Alex, I don't know if he's here from Intel, often is interested in the space, and so kind of the things I'm wondering, like, is in some of these call flows, there might be other desires, like we've heard desires that on an allocate flow, they want to be able to pass parameters. And so I'm kind of wondering, like on a deallocate flow, would you need particular parameters passed? Like what are maybe for shared use devices, is there something unique around how that device is prepared that even on the allocate step, we're not working out? And so maybe the next step is we can just get like a shorter group of us together on maybe SIG Node Slack to say, hey, can you review this and draw some attention, and if we can get a group.
sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Alex's immediate comment on Slack is that they asked for this 3 years ago, and so okay, maybe you can follow up on Slack with them. Yeah.
We actually created issue like 3 years ago or something like that. So like exactly about this topic. So
okay. All right.
I would like to also mention that a living device uncleared like under the until the next use is not good from security point of view in multi-tenants environment. So they like some, for example, FPGAs, they can have like some functions that users like one tenant wouldn't be like happy to share with others. So the cleaning them up just after the workload is finished would be better.
Mm-hmm.
And the assumption here is that the actor who's responsible for cleaning it up is not the pod author itself, right? Is that a?
Yes, because but it's not technically a program. It's not like a GPU. When the program is done, it's out. It's a circuit, so it's there unless you actually clear it out. So you can't really say that I'm going to clean it up after it's done working in the container. It's just not possible. Plus, they're really made to keep functioning until you kill the container. Not they don't have an exit condition from inside. That's what it means.
Okay, so maybe we can try to get some momentum behind this in the upcoming release. But for today, it just seems like we have an action item to try to get a group of folks together to see what we want to do potentially in device plugins in 122 and beyond, and
okay,
find a plan on that. Is that a fair outcome?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk next week.
I don't know if it'll be next week, but like at least we should get something together either on the SIG Node mailing list, see if we can get like a group or of just like interested participants, or that's probably the best path forward. Maybe we can follow up on that, and maybe we can find some dedicated time to talk about what we want to do with device plugins.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Elana, you had the next item here for approvers. I'm happy to help. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Maybe I will not go over that again, but say the announcement that I missed saying, which was there's a contributor survey. You should participate in it. It's not going out to like all of the channels because I think they only want to hear from contributors, not just from Kubernetes users. So please fill out the survey.
Cool. And Vinay, I think you were next for VPA. I'll just preface by saying I still haven't had time to look at post 121 items. But is there a particular item you wanted to call out on this? I don't see Vinay. Okay. Back to you, Elana, on talking about swap progress.
Oh no, so Swap, it's making progress. I have synced with a few people. I have taken various comments in the doc and tried to sort of squish them into at least what an MVP proposal looks like for alpha, so that in terms of targeting next release in the next couple of weeks, we can get together a cap and we can sort of at least hash that out for alpha. I don't know that there's necessarily alignment in terms of where we want to go for like beta and GA, but I think that people are relatively aligned for what we want to do for alpha, which would be next release. So if you have not had a chance to look at that, please look at that and comment away. Let me know if you're interested, if you want to get more involved, that kind of thing. Yeah, a bunch of people have been reaching out to me, like I guess there was something on Hacker News recently about systemd umd, and so a bunch of people have been reaching out to me being like, I saw that you're doing things with swap and Kubernetes. So there's definitely very wide interest in this. And so, yeah, I'd encourage people, I hear the interest, but, make sure that you're actually like guiding us in the right direction to ensure that, it's not just interest, it's also that we're getting other people's voices involved as well. So yeah, I'll try to get a cap together within the next couple of weeks, especially if there isn't much more comment there, but we may need to schedule more time for like a wider discussion once we get into that, undoubtedly. So.
Is there anything that like is a surprise from what you have in the doc as we review it, like, or any changes that we think would be needed to the CRI that we want to call out early?
So that's a good question. I think that if you look at, I think the section that I linked, this is kind of like, what does an alpha look like? And I'm hoping that that should be relatively uncontroversial. I think in terms of an alpha, because there's so much that could possibly change, what I am proposing currently, and which I think is mostly like people have alignment on for what we should do for alpha, is we like allow the kubelet to run with swap on the node, but we ensure that like CRIs are not like telling workloads that they can run with swap. So in theory, like, we're not really exposing the swap to the workloads, but we turn swap on the node and see what happens as an alpha feature. Because if there's like serious stability or accounting issues, like just getting in and kind of doing all that initial grunt work is probably going to take a release. And then like making sure that we're actually testing it and it looks like semi-stable, I think that'll be, a full release cycle just to kind of get the foundation in place. And then once we get there, we can talk about what we want like workload exposure to the swap to look like beyond just there's some swap on the node as a shared resource, and the system processes are maybe able to use it. Maybe we have a possibility of like bringing in things like umd, but it's all very open still, I would say.
So the prioritization is to protect the node agents before empowering the workloads? Yeah.
Oh, well, and ensuring that we're not going to have some sort of like terrible knock-on effects from enabling swap as well. Like baby steps towards being able to enable that.
So I wouldn't be opposed to actually adding changes to the CRI, because I don't think, we'll be hiding this behind a flag anyways, like we wouldn't be enabling it by default, right?
Yes.
So what we can do is we can add the CRI changes and not set those values. So at least we can start experimenting on this, because umd and all those features depend on cgroups v2 and enabling swap. So I'd rather that we start testing out sooner than later.
Yeah,
like,
well, so I'm thinking that like, if we enable this, so say we enable swap on a node, I think we're going to have to go in and do all of that plumbing in the CRI, but it'll effectively all like be off by default. But that would enable us going forward in order to be able to start twiddling those values.
Yeah, like as an initial one, right, we can have a percentage like simple setting for an alpha. So someone can like play with it, test it, and then come back and have more solid recommendations on how it should be allowed to be tuned. So like you have some memory limit or request, and your swap should be a percentage of that, like 100%, 80%, 75%. That could be a potential knob. I'll comment as such.
Yeah, I think make sure that you're taking a look, commenting on the doc. I suspect that this has been low priority given all of the other priorities within the release cycle. But given that we're coming up on the end of 121, just wanted to make sure I flagged it. It's in people's back of mind, and that we're going to get enough attention to actually go in and put together a KEP that everybody is happy with, or mostly happy with.
Yeah, I just think maybe we attract a different audience if depending on prioritization. So like if we say we want to support running or tolerate running on hosts with swap to protect the node agents themselves, but not empower a workload, like that gets a different audience than the audience who said, I want to be able to have my workload consume swap directly and stuff. So no strong opinions one way or the other one if like that's a bad choice, but I think we should just be clear on which persona we're tackling first.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the problem is that like sort of the initial plumbing work in terms of just like a phased rollout, because swap would be potentially so disruptive to a cluster. I think that probably like any initial work that you'd be doing in the scope of one release probably would not necessarily be enough to like start running workloads with swap. But we could potentially see like stability improvements off of the bat. And so that's kind of how I've been prioritizing use cases, just like trying to ensure that given that we probably can't ship something like fully featured that will help workloads in one go, maybe focus on that initial stability use case and then look at how we're going to phase that out to benefit workloads in like beta and onwards.
So I don't think I mean, from Google is working on that as well, Icon call, but I think in single release we can do that. We already experimenting with enabling swap for customers who are running single pod per node. And these customers typically run some like either machine learning stuff or something that requires loading enormous files into memory, and they will just benefit from having extra swap memory to load these files and don't worry about actual memory limits on a node. So we can do something in a single release, and we actually have some use cases that we want to tackle. So it would be great to start working on that.
From what I could see, at least in the doc, that doesn't seem like one of the major use cases, like the idea of a single pod on a node and nothing else gets scheduled there, and that thing sort of has free reign in terms of swap allocation on the node. That doesn't seem like a super common use case, and I think there has been at least a lot of community push to not want to sort of treat swap like, you know, emergency memory or extra expansion of memory. There are other use cases that people have been directing prioritization away from there. So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility. Thus far, like consensus does not appear to be in that direction. I mean, if that's what we want swap to be, then we can have a discussion about that. But that doesn't seem to be the majority view currently.
I just think that if we want to enable something in single release that people will be using, that may be a use case that we can tackle. Like it doesn't require most of accounting work and the stuff.
Okay, well, it looks like we have a place that we can direct feedback. So thanks, Elana, for that update. I'm sorry, I'm just like cache switching. I'm trying to think, what is it that we would actually need to do in the kubelet, because you could turn fail swap on off today, I guess. And trying to think what is the change, but give me a second to change my mindset. So Jeremy, you want to talk next on node problem detector?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I was in discussions with the node problem detector team over the last couple of months on basically a design on how to add Windows support. So a few people have read the document and reviewed it, but I'm still definitely open to feedback on it. It's definitely not like a fully closed thing. It's more of like a living document, but it's basically a discussion, and this is also happening for SIG Windows as well, on how do we improve node problem detector to run on Windows, and then also how do we make it so that it does the equivalent of what Linux has on Windows. So basically detecting like things like kernel failures and stuff like that, and what kind of things to look for. So like for example, one of the unique things we'll probably be looking for is basically like activation status, for licensing reasons. And so please feel free to look at the design document. Feedback is also welcome, and I've linked the bug to that. And this is more of like, hey, this is kind of what's happening, and reviews or anything like that would also be helpful. And that's mainly it.
Cool.
Oh, and quick status on it. It builds now, so you can actually get a binary for it. And soon we'll be adding Windows service support for it.
Very cool. And then last topic on today's agenda was Jim.
Hi there. Yeah, I didn't have too much of a big update. I did, after some great discussion last week, I did post an issue to Kubernetes about this, sort of phrased in the language of, let's just look at the conformance test as something that's maybe a little bit too strict, and some of the reasons why we might want to allow administrators or solutions to not have the mount space be the host mount namespace. So it goes into a little more detail as well about the systemd issue and what the specifics are around why it is inefficient. And I can talk a little bit more about there if people are curious. But just thought I'd just let you know that the issue's there, open for comments and more discussion there, unless there are any specific questions right now.
Yeah, so I had followed up with Don a little bit this afterwards, and I think a few of us on the call. The testing question isn't actually a conformance test, so I just wanted to make sure, is there actually a conformance test that we label as conformance? Because the mount propagation stuff is not at present in conformance. So I just wanted to see if we could get that clarified.
Oh, well, that's my misunderstanding then of what exactly conformance test means.
Yeah, so if the
test isn't as,
if the test has a bracket conformance next to it, it should be in conformance, or but I didn't think when we looked up afterwards that it actually did. So maybe if we can just make sure the issue points to the testing question and make sure there's no confusion on if it's actually conformance or not. That's probably
absolutely. I can do that.
Cool. All right. I don't know if there's other questions on this. I know Dawn's not here and she was particularly interested on this, but she's not here to give her feedback. So hopefully we can get her feedback asynchronous.
Sure. I mean, maybe I can just say a couple of words real quick about the systemd issue now that I know a little bit more about the specifics. Basically, the inefficiency that we were seeing in systemd is kind of two parts. One is systemd itself had some inefficiencies in how it was sort of rescanning the mount information out of proc. And that has been fixed to some degree. I think the patch went into like mainline systemd in December. And so, OpenShift doesn't have it yet. So that's, there's going to be a lag time before everyone gets that fixed. But even with that fix, it decreases the problem by, I think the estimation was, 30 to 50%. But that means that there is still an overhead involved in having a large number of mount points that even the latest, systemd isn't going to address. So there is still some value in doing this just for efficiency's sake, as well as some of the other reasons that I mentioned in the issue. The second piece of it is really about a more granular mechanism for the kernel to signal what parts of the mount info have changed as mounts come and go and change. And it just seems like that, I think there was an FS info was the name of the call that people were kind of pushing for, but the development of that seems to be very slow. So I don't think anyone's very optimistic that will arrive in the kernel anytime soon. That would be the second piece that would really take that, 30 to 50% efficiency that's already in mainline systemd down to something a lot lower.
So I know this is a Red Hat focused issue, and I know we have particular segments. One of the things I'm curious is, I don't know if anyone from Intel was here, but there are particular classes of workloads where this type of CPU excess is potentially excessive. And so I'm just wondering if anybody else has discovered this issue outside of maybe Red Hat's experience. Thinking things like anybody who might work with telco verticals or that type of thing, where minimizing latency is important. So maybe a call to action for those folks who are interested in those communities to maybe share their experience. Cool. All right. Well, that I think we've gotten through today's agenda. Are there any items that we wanted to talk through that did not have time to talk through? Take topics now. Otherwise, we can get back to hopefully closing out the release and starting to plan for a successful next release. That's twice. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, everyone.